Two things I just shared very quickly. The first one is asking questions. Jesus was asked over 300 questions by people across the Gospels, and yet the number of questions that he answered, I think, is between 3 and 8, because he always responded to those questions with another question. And so I think often when we're thinking about how do we talk about truth, how do we talk about Jesus, we often feel like there's a lot of pressure on us to be able to have the right answers, to be able to know what we're talking about in like really precise ways, particularly when we're talking about truth. That you think, okay, I need to leave this to the academics, to the elites, to those who kind of are able to put together some kind of precise response to this particular question, because I just don't know, so I'm tapping out. And I think the beautiful thing that we see, particularly in the book of 1 Peter, is that here you have Christians who are living in diaspora. They're spread out and they're suffering for the gospel. And it's as they're suffering that Peter says, what does he say? He says, be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have, but do so with gentleness and respect. So be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. Now that seems to assume that people are going to ask questions to the Christian that have been provoked as a result of suffering. And so I think that kind of reveals two things. I think it shows us that, firstly, the way in which we live our lives provokes questions as we suffer. But also thinking about how Jesus responds to questions with questions is to think, well, okay, how do we not only be ready to give a reason for the hope that we have, but how do we also do so in a way that brings about a conversation that isn't kind of, the person standing on a street corner shouting answers at somebody who isn't listening. And so I think that is a really good way to think, how can I ask questions that I've asked in the past, and some of my friends do too, is thinking about, for example, what do you mean by that? I think, what do you mean by that? It seems quite an easy thing to ask. The hardest thing often in these conversations is, what's the next best question? I've asked that question, they've shared something, I don't know what to say now. Then you say, well, why do you say that? And then you share a bit more and you say, well, have you ever wondered? Have you ever wondered why this is so precious to you? Have you ever wondered why relationships are so meaningful? Have you ever wondered why it is that, we can't help but whatever? So asking questions is really good, and being then prepared to give an answer for the hope that we have when hopefully they ask us one back. I think it was John Lennox who says, keep asking questions until they ask you a question back. So it's not a reason to ask questions is hoping that they're going to ask you something, so you just get to suddenly just share like a 10-minute kind of dialogue. But I think it really honours the person in front of us, and shows us that asking questions is a great way in which to know about the person, not only just to use them as an opportunity to springboard to the gospel. So that's one. And another one is the work of Dan Stranger's recent book, Plugged In. Lovely little book. He kind of goes through 4 ways in which Paul in Acts 17 enters, engages, exposes, and then evangelizes the culture. And so what does it look like for us to do that? That's also a lovely little framework that people can draw upon.